Well, hello, my name's Louise. A very warm welcome to my channel. That didn't sound aggressive. It was a bit like, oh, my name's Louise. Very warm welcome to my channel if you're a returning viewer, and an equally warm welcome if you are viewing my channel for the very first time. So I have had the most spectacular reading month. I was lucky enough to start off September, it seems ages ago now, in Madrid, and had a week there with a couple of friends, so did quite a bit of reading because although we were in a city, we were having quite a relaxed trip. And then, yeah, I've done quite a few events this month which involved quite a bit of reading, so that sort of puts me under some really positive reading pressure. And then, yeah, I just seem to have had a really varied, I was going to say vivid, that would have been the wrong word, a really, really varied reading month. So without further ado, so first of all, I was due to interview an author called Conn Iggulden, who wrote this book, Nero, so I was happily sent the book by the publisher, and I approached this with a certain amount of caution because these are best-selling books about Nero. It's a trilogy that Conn has written, and I have seen his books in charity shops, in big bookshops. He's a best-selling author, and I think perhaps sometimes I have a bit of because I really enjoy literary fiction. So there's a part of me, maybe sounds awful, that perhaps has a little bit of snobbery about this type of thing. But what's not to like about reading a book about Nero? He writes fiction. Oh my goodness, I was blown away by this. I could not put it down. Boy, can Conn Iggulden tell a story. His ability to narrate and have you on the edge of your seat. I read this with the pleasure with which I devoured I, Claudius by Robert Graves when I was a young kid, and I was first exposed to information about the ancient Roman emperors, well, from Augustus onwards, and those books were part, I think, of what inspired me to go off and study classics at university. And I think if I'd read these at that age, it would have been even more of a prompt, because what Conn Iggulden does is he removes all the, Robert Graves's books are brilliant, but there's a lot of detail about military history and things like that in them. And what Conn Iggulden does is he reduces it, and I don't mean that in a he doesn't do it in a patronising way. He's got a very clear idea of who he thinks Nero was and how he thinks that Nero has been misrepresented by history. And this book is a romp because he does characterization really well. He has you on the edge of your seat. I couldn't put it down. And Roman history is fascinating anyway. And as a classicist as well, this was, I wasn't reading a story that I didn't know. I was reading something that I've read about this period in history and studied it, but he brought a freshness to it. He brought new perspectives. He's made me rethink some of my attitudes towards this period in history. And the thing that I absolutely love him for is that he has taken the character of Agrippina, who was Nero's mother. She was wife to an emperor, she was daughter of an emperor, she was mother to an emperor. And really, in a way, the title Nero is misleading because Nero doesn't feature that much in this book. It's much more, I think, about Agrippina's story. And of course, you've got the character of the Emperor Claudius, who comes in towards the end and then is taken up in the second, because this is a trilogy, the second book, Tyrant. And this book focuses a lot on Claudius's reign, because, well, is it a spoiler? Maybe I won't say what's happened with Claudius and Agrippina. I don't know. But it's looking at Nero's late adolescence and sort of him in his early 20s, up until the period where he gets to rule. So Nero has this reputation as being the guy who fiddled while Rome burned. His opulence, his indulgence, etc., etc. But Conn Iggulden is trying to demonstrate that this was a young man who was given power at an incredibly young age, and power corrupts. That possibly before that time, you know, he might have gone in a sort of different direction had that not happened. And also some quite shocking details about what happened in his childhood. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say too much because it genuinely would spoil it. And I was lucky enough to get to see Conn speak at an event, and again, you know, he was amazing. He's a natural spellbinding storyteller. He was talking about leadership and power, and dotting around between, you know, he'd go from Genghis Khan to Caesar to Nero, talking about those men as leaders, because he's written about all of them. And again, I think, you know, well, I know I will be desperate to read the third. I think it comes out quite soon, maybe earlier next year. I can't remember what it's called, the next one. Yeah, I can't remember. It doesn't actually say. But, you know, there will be another one of these on its way within the next 12 months, and I will be there. I will be reading it. And I must, before I put it down, that snake. I mean, sorry if you don't like snakes very much. I find snakes creepy, but I think that is beautiful. And then I read Claire Fuller's Memory of Animals, which I'd been really looking forward to, because I first came across Claire Fuller when she was shortlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction for Unsettled Ground, which I thought was a wonderful novel. And I really, really enjoyed aspects of this novel, but I think I'd got, perhaps my expectations of it were too high. So it tells the story of a young woman, Neffy, who wakes up completely disorientated. She's in a hospital, she's isolated, and she's sort of hearing things, she's in and out of consciousness. So it's brilliant. The opening is really disorientating. And it tells the story. This is definitely it feels like a very sort of post-pandemic sort of novel. It really brought back memories to me of the COVID experience. But in this case, she's with a group of people who have been given or not given a vaccine as an experiment. She's volunteered to be part of an experiment, and this group of people have to survive within this hospital setting. And again, I've got to be really careful to try not to try to avoid spoilers. I'm not going to say much more about it. And I really like the character of Neffy. I found her really interesting. I found the situation, the scenario interesting. The descriptions of what was going on outside the hospital were great. And the sort of genius of it is that Neffy is also sort of talking to an octopus. So there's quite a lot in here about her relationship with her parents, which I really enjoyed. My caveat is that I didn't find the group of people, the individual characters, particularly interesting. They frustrated me. Now, that might have been the design of the author. And I didn't necessarily always believe in the way that they were reacting to their situation. Now, again, that's my personal taste. And, you know, I know that many people have really, really enjoyed this book, but I had a few little frustrations as I was reading it. Having said all that, I'll definitely be reading more by Claire Fuller. And then I read No Friend to This House, which doesn't have the title on because it's a proof copy. And I was also lucky enough last week to go and see Natalie Haynes do her show with the same title. And this is Natalie Haynes, who has made a living, most admirably from my point of view, of blending sort of stand-up and a passion for communicating all things ancient history and classical. So I am a real devotee of this woman. And this time she's chosen to retell the story of Jason and the Argonauts, But what she's done, as she always does with myth, is she's taken the feminine perspective. So we get Jason's story from the point of view of lots of different women that he encounters. So I've described this before as a polyphonic novel. You get all these different voices coming in at you, and it's a really exhaustive exploration of Jason's story. Medea, spoiler, doesn't come into it till about 2/3 of the way through, because Natalie Haynes charts his journey from Iolkos in Greece, where he lived, and was given the challenge of finding the golden fleece, which comes from this ram which literally has a golden fleece. So we get his whole story. We get the story of the Argo, the boat, the men who sailed in it, people like Hercules and Orpheus, and also these incredible encounters with women on the way. And then the last sort of third of the book is focusing on the material from Euripides' Medea, when Medea and Jason arrive back in Greece, and Medea makes an incredible decision. And again, I'm not going to give any spoilers away, to avenge her husband for taking on a new wife. And for me, Euripides' Medea is one of the most powerful plays in ancient Greek tragedy, and probably, you know, any tragedy that's ever written. It's been incredibly influential. I would put it alongside Oedipus Rex, and also Aeschylus Agamemnon, which I love, and Euripides' Bacchae, for anyone who's interested. I absolutely, the Bacchae for me is probably my favourite ancient Greek tragedy, but there we are. And actually it's on in London. I'm really desperate to see it, so I'm hoping to get tickets to do that. Right, and then I read Great Escapes 4, which might seem a little bit unusual for me. I was blown away by this book, so much so that you'll notice if you look at my channel that I've actually made a whole video about this book, because it was so powerful. It tells the story of 5 SAS Great Escapes. It's the 4th in a series. I haven't read the other 3. I didn't need to have done, because what Damien Lewis does is he makes each escape a separate, it's almost like reading short stories, but it's non-fiction. And these stories blew my mind. The persistence, the resilience, the horrendous conditions, the way that these men are determined to escape from the most awful prison situations, where you think the odds are completely against them, and yet they manage to do it, and often in really, really blatant ways. But he doesn't just tell the story of each escape, he tells the story of each mission that the men were involved in order to escape, and they are jaw-dropping. And I've realised a convert to this type of record of what these amazing men did in defence of democracy. And actually, you know, I think these stories at the moment, when you think about the political situation in Europe, in America, and obviously other parts of the world, I think these stories are more pertinent now than they perhaps have ever been, because unfortunately, if we're not careful, we're going to be putting our young men into these situations again, and that really, really concerns me. So yeah, I urge you to read this. It's fantastic. And then I read Truth or Dare and Other Stories by Nadia, Kabir, Barb, who very kindly gave me this book at the Women's Prize Festival last year. And she is a English Bangladeshi writer. And so these stories are set, some of them in London, some of them in Bangladesh. And I really, really enjoyed this collection. Like any short story collection, I find there were some stories that blew me away, and others which left me a little bit, you know, I thought that the ending was maybe a little bit cliched or whatever. But I find that even with Margaret Atwood, so that's not a criticism of her. And there are some stories in here that I think are really, really powerful. One of them was a story about a young man who was sitting begging by the roadside in Bangladesh, and his relationship with a chai stall holder and a man with a briefcase. And that story I thought was absolutely superb. I really felt like I was in the streets of Dakar as I was reading it. There was another brilliant story about a woman who is sat beside her dying husband's bedside. He's on life support, and that story did not go in the direction I was expecting at all. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. There's a real no nonsense clarity to her prose, which I really liked. And then I read 3 very short reads for Shorty September, which again I've made a separate video about, but I will briefly mention. First was Days at the and I loved all 3 of these, by the way. They're very different, but I love them all. The first was Days at the Morisaki Bookshop, which is a Japanese book, and I loved this. It was a real sort of palate cleanser after some of the other reading I've been doing, because it's a gentle story of a young woman who whose relationship breaks down, and she goes to live while she sort of gets her act together with her uncle in his bookshop. Well, not with him, he's not living there. And it's about the power of books, really, to transform people's lives, and also to give you an indication of, you know, the books that we read perhaps demonstrate something about ourselves. But it's also the story about her relationship with her uncle, and how, as a young person, we have one view of our uncle and our step aunt as we're growing up, and then we get a different perspective we have one view when we're younger, and then we gain a different perspective as we grow up. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Then I read The Devastating Small Boat by Vincent Delecroix, which again I thought was absolutely amazing. I read it in 2 sittings. It would have been better to read in 1 sitting, I think, if you could, but I didn't have the time. It tells the story of the true story of a small boat crossing from France to the UK with migrants. It's illegal, and there is this kind of battle about whether this boat is in French water, whether it's in English water, and we follow the mind of a woman who was working in the control centre in France. And transcripts of her conversations with the people from the boat and the emergency services, etc., have been recorded, and she is talking to a policewoman who is investigating what's happened, and it's deeply shocking. It's made me think again, even though I think about this kind of thing a lot, about, you know, who's to blame, what's my involvement as a member of society in all of this. A deeply political and philosophical book, and yeah, brilliant. And then I read the wonderful, oh my goodness, this book. If you want to read a book that is full of, oh my goodness, I don't know how to describe it. Oh, I thought I could, and now I'm struggling. And I've already talked about this book once on a different video, but it's Mothering Sunday by Graham Swift. It tells the story of a young woman who's living in service in a stately home, she gets the day off because it's Mother's Day. It's the 1920s. She gets the day off, and she spends it very passionately, shall we say. So it's a book about passion. It's a book about class. It's a book about reflection, because she is looking back, or you get the sense that she's looking back from her sort of 90-year-old perspective at this particular moment in her life, and how it's affected her ever since. And there are some really good twists in here, and it's just a masterclass in how to write. I just think it's a quintessentially English novel, and it's beautiful. And then, oh wow, so I haven't quite finished this, and I kind of don't want to, and I'm so late to the party, because I think this was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2023, so that's a couple of years ago now, and it's The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. And I've been wanting to get to this book for a long time. I've finished all my sort of, you know, event reading for the moment, and so I've got free reading time. So the first thing I did was reach for this. This is an absolute gem of a book. I only started it, it's 600 pages long, and I only started it 3 days ago, and I've got about 100 pages left. Because I can't put it down. The minute I started reading it, you know, when you start reading a book and the voice just totally resonates with you, this is just the sort of fiction that I love, because you are in the hands of a master storyteller. He gets really into the teeth of his characters. It's set in Ireland, in a small town, not too far from Dublin. And it tells the story of the Barnes family. I think they're the Barnes family. Yes, they are the Barnes family. And they are sort of nouveau riche, but they are just falling on hard times. So it starts with the daughter's perspective. There's mother, father, daughter, son. So it starts with Cass's perspective, the daughter. You think you're going to be in her head for the entirety of the novel. You're not. You take it in turns, very lengthy, you know, immersive turns, almost sort of short novel length turns in the heads of each of these family members. So you're seeing the same events from different perspectives, but you're getting a whole new narrative each time. And the style of writing is just the sort of thing I love, because the characterization is brilliant, the descriptions are amazing, the dialogue is superb. He doesn't use speech marks because he's sort of, I think, trying to sort of capture the thought process of reflection. You can hear the Irish lilt. It's funny, it's tragic. There are some scenes in here that have literally taken my breath away. Because it covers all of human life, of contemporary or roughly contemporary human existence seems to be in this novel. We've got sibling relationships, we've got, you know, it's a family saga in many ways, but also we've got the impact of the crash on this family. So we're looking, you know, there's the economics of life. Of course, there's the, you know, the Irish situation politically. There are characters in this book from all different walks of life and all different backgrounds. All, you know, all humanity is here. And it gets rave reviews from everybody and anybody. And and the bee sting of the title is not, I don't know, I didn't know what it referred to, and I'm not going to tell you because you need to read this for yourself if you haven't done already. But the story of the bee sting in itself is just, and the way it kind of recurs and repeats. The motifs through this book are really clever. The way characters appear, disappear, reappear. I don't know how he did this. It's sort of, you know, when I think of novels like Middlemarch and those great sort of classic Victorian novels, or I think of something like Demon Copperhead, this is in that vein. It's in that tradition. It's a masterpiece, and I think this will, you know, become a classic of English literature. I really do. It's just stunning. Yeah, if you've read it, please let me know what you thought of it, because I am seeing it with it's I think it's flawless. I honestly don't think for a 600-page novel, well, I haven't finished it yet, I've got about 100 left, but I don't think there's a word out of place in this book. I just think it's absolutely fantastic. So please, comments below, what did you think? You know, there will be some people who hated it, and I, you know, I'm intrigued by that. I'd like to know why. I find that I love these discussions. We can agree to disagree about books. That's partly why we read, I think. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now. So that, I don't know how October is going to live up to September, really, because it's just been the most eclectic. I've had fiction, I've had non-fiction, I've had short stories, I've had big chunkster, I've had lots of short reads, and it has been a truly brilliant reading month. So there we are. I'm off now. Bye.